Shields.
I'm David Singleton.
I'm Morgan Kistner.
And I'm Leyland Borum.
And this is our project about climate change.
Now, what is climate change? So, climate change is basically global warming. And global warming is basically when there are gases in the atmosphere, like atoms of carbon dioxide or methane gases, are sent into the atmosphere and lower the temperature of the Earth.
And so weather, which is somewhat a part of climate, it is the daily intake of patterns like such as rain or sun throughout a certain region.
The difference between weather and climate is, whereas weather is usually seen as patterns over time.
And one thing that affects the climate is agriculture, because cows emit the most amount of CO2, even more than cars and airplanes and trains combined. So one way that you can help combat the rise of CO2 in the atmosphere is by eating less meat.
Weather is the daily forecast of a specific area, whereas climate expresses weather patterns over a long period of time.
And climate change is the increase in the average temperature of the Earth over a certain period of time. And the greenhouse effect affects climate change because it is the trapping of gases that trap heat. So climate change and greenhouse effect go hand in hand.
And several gases that actually trap heat, the gases in the atmosphere, such as CO2, are caused by many things, such as agriculture, any type of transportation, and also electrical power homes and all things like that.
Agriculture is actually one of the top emitters of greenhouse gases, and one way that you can help stop emitting so much CO2 is by eating less meat at least once a week or going fully vegetarian.
Throughout our time at Wolverine Pathways, we conducted a series of experiments. The first one we did was a representation of what CO2 does to the Earth's atmosphere in terms of temperature. To conduct this experiment, we had 2 bottles filled with 1/3 of water. 1 bottle remained untouched and sealed under the heating lamp, while the other received an Alka-Seltzer tablet to create CO2 in the sealed bottle. Over a course of 15 minutes, we recorded the temperature every 10 minutes. Then we plotted the data on a graph, and we were thoroughly surprised. We hypothesized the CO2 bottle would have a higher temperature than the control bottle. We were surprised because the temperatures barely moved until the 40-minute mark.
Our results for this experiment were very strange. The temperatures of the 2 bottles did not vary that much. In fact, they only stayed between about 27 and 29 degrees. And the bottles both fluctuated very much, going between 27 to 28, back down to 27, up to 29. It was very strange.
This experiment shows how ocean acidification affects sea creatures. Their outer shells dissolve when water becomes acidic from CO2. To show this reaction, we soaked an eggshell in vinegar overnight. The shell went from sharp and hard to soft and see-through. This shows how CO2 affects sea creatures with climate change.
As you see represented in this diagram, oceans dramatically absorb carbon dioxide, thus making more carbonic acid in the waters. So our shellfish are being harmed by this greatly. And an experiment you'll see coming up, to represent it, we filled 2 cups of cabbage solution, and I personally blew air into one of the cups for 5 minutes, and in turn it made the solution lighter. And this basically just proves how much the carbon is harming our oceans, and we need to save them.
In the carbonate versus non-carbonate experiment, we put the indicator fluid in 2 cups, then placed each of the cups in a bigger cup of water. In one of the cups of water, 2 Alka-Seltzer tablets were placed in the cup, then both cups were covered with plastic wrap and tape. While the Alka-Seltzer was dissolving in one of the cups, both cups were swished around constantly. As time passed, the indicator in the water with the Alka-Seltzer turned pink, while the corresponding indicator in regular water stayed purple. All results of this experiment demonstrated how carbon dioxide, when absorbed by the ocean, makes the ocean more acidic.
And here's a video of me turning red because I was rapidly blowing into this cup for 5 minutes straight. And here's a before and after.
In the Rising Sea Levels experiment, we tested to see the difference between land ice and sea ice when it comes to sea level rise. We hypothesized that the land ice would make the water rise more, since sea ice is already included in the water's volume. During the experiment, there was a measuring error, so the data didn't turn out as expected. We do think that had there not been a measurement mistake, the land ice would have risen and sea ice would have stayed the same as predicted.
And here's a short video of the experiment.
Because I'd have to go through Carter.
A carbon footprint shows how you emit carbon in your daily life. Our carbon footprints included food, gas, shelter, and other daily activities. In my carbon footprint, food took up a majority, followed by shelter and mobility.
For my carbon footprint, food and goods made up about 75% of the footprint, whereas the other 25% was made up of shelter, mobility, and services.
And in my carbon footprint, I thought the most would be electricity and water, when in actuality it was goods and food, with services not that far behind.
For my carbon footprint, I thought that I was going to have a lot more going towards transportation, electricity, and offset, like fuel and stuff like that. But it turns out it was really more of just foods and goods that I spent most of my carbon footprint on. Several ways to reduce are dieting, reducing your food waste, compost and recycling, choosing your family size and support, biking, walking, carpooling, stuff like that. Any of that can help you reduce on your carbon footprint.
Thank you for watching our video.
We really hope this changes your views about climate change.
And we hope you take into consideration what we have said today, because we are the future generation.
And in addition, we hope that you can change your lifestyles so the earth will become a better place to live in.
Thank you. And here are some bloopers for your amusement. Okay, stop doing more of it. Okay. This is so stupid.
Oh, it's going. Okay.
Just go, you cut it out.
I'm Noelle Shields. Say her name.
David!
Name it, what, bro?
Hard. I can't do it.
Just go.
You're wasting space
Just
there.
go.
You're wasting space on my phone.
We're retaking. We're retaking it.
Cut it out.
Just press the button.
I'm Noelle Shields,
I'm David Singleton.
I'm Morgan Kissman.
And I'm Layla Moore.
and this is our project about climate change.
Wait, is that me?
No.
Okay, now we have to start.
Just go. No, stop. We can cut it out. Don't you dare press it. Go. It's such a question.
So,
How do greenhouse gases up? And you don't have to
No.
start it over.
Because if Noelle speaks,
I'm gonna cut it out, okay? You said it.
yes.
I have nothing better to do.
okay, I'm gonna put the paper down.
Oh, it was already recording?
Yeah.
Stop it.
It's okay.
I'm Noelle Shields.
I'm David Singleton.
I'm sorry.
Oh my
Oh my goodness.
Edit it out.
Do I say anything? I just say weather. Just start with weather is blank.
No, cutting.
Weather is daily forecast of a specific area.
Oh my gosh. Just like, you talk so soft. Every other time you talk so loud, but then you're like, you just talk louder. We're like,
Go.
I was looking at the camera.
Oh my god. Okay.
Go.
Weather is the daily forecast of a specific area, whereas climate is weather. Oh my god.
Just go with it.
Go.
Weather is the daily forecast of a specific area, whereas climate expresses weather patterns over a long period of time.
And climate change has a big effect on the wait. I'm sorry. Okay. Can we start it over?